market-owned brand goods. You may record his colleague George Eustace making a bit of a horse's backside of himself, and he said, "Yes, I did. I was in Asda just 5 hours ago." To which I replied, "Well, at 2 a.m. Oh, no, sorry. I meant 5 in the afternoon. But Asda is a 24-hour store. So many of you getting involved in that. Steve, in Newark, I've got to jump in on this. Asda is not 24 hours, and it has been for years. While it's not the biggest lie in the world, it has to be said, if you're trying to defend your government's failure to protect people from the effects of the cost of living, it's not a good idea to be caught out again. Adrian Berry says, some people get the key to the city. Bob Jenrick has clearly been given the key to Asda. It isn't 24 hours. A 2 a.m. shopping spree? Well, I suppose it's better than sleepwalking, and this goes on and on. Let's look at other matters, though, more broadly, when it comes to this to these local elections and what it might mean for the general election. Nikki says, we still have Labour in Sunderland. The candidate in our area and other parts of Sunderland never took our local elections seriously, and I take from that possibly you'd have liked a change of pace, but that obviously is now not going to happen. Dave in Clevedon, in North Somerset, says, listening to the guest comment on Northern Ireland and DUP's support loss over Brexit, in my opinion, Northern Ireland needs to make up its mind what it wants, staying in the EU or with the UK. If it wants to rejoin the EU, they'll have to take the euro, join the Republic and adhere to power-crazed Brussels. It's their choice, but good luck with that. Tanya picks up on something interesting, which we probably haven't given enough coverage of. I find interesting is the fact that Bristol has voted in a referendum to abolish the position of mayor in a couple of years. In London, we have a Lord Mayor of the city, a position going back hundreds of years. Yet we also have a mayor who, in my opinion, has far too much power, and the ratepayers cost millions of pounds. London should go back to the original system and would have no autonomous power. It is interesting, actually. That is the rather controversial mayor down in Bristol, and the local people in a referendum have voted that they would like to stop that procedure and have it governed by committee. I wonder if there's a similar feeling, whether in some instances some of those local mayors have not performed that well. On the subject of not performing well, it is the turn of the chairman of the Conservative Party, Oliver Dowden, who received the hospital pass to go out and try and put a positive spin on what's been a night of blue murder. OK, why did it go so badly wrong for the Conservatives, Mr. Chairman? Good morning.
Well, first of all, Nick, it's never a hospital pass to talk to you. It's always a pleasure to do so.
Thank you.
And of course, if you look at London, we have had some difficult results. There's no point in denying that. But actually, if you look across the country, it's quite a mixed picture. So we made gains in places like Nuneaton, in Hartlepool, in parts of outer the fringes of London. I think if you take the picture of all of that, it really doesn't show that Labour has the momentum to form the next government. OK,
let's focus a little bit more. You may well be right with that, but a little bit more on the Conservative woes. What do you think was the biggest problem for your colleagues who were out there knocking on doors? Was it so-called Partygate? Was it the cost of living crisis? Or was it that Rishi Sunak could have been seen to do more as regards tax cuts or other financial measures, Mr. Chairman?
Well, of course, these were midterm elections, and when you've been in government for 12 years, you're going to have lots of different issues coming up on the doorstep. And of course, all the kind of issues that you described came up on the doorstep. I would, though, also say that what came up on the doorstep was a sense that this government was getting on with things, whether that was the delivery of the vaccine programme, that means the economy's back open and unemployment's falling, or whether that's the Prime Minister's leadership in Ukraine. But you would expect, and you've done many of these shows before, you know that midterm governments don't tend to do well. And actually, if you compare it to, say, what Tony Blair achieved in 95, 2 years before the election, he was gaining 1,800 seats. Miliband was gaining about 800 in 2011. So whilst these are challenging results, they're just not consistent with any other than the usual challenges we have midterm.
I'm sure soon you and senior colleagues will settle down with the Prime Minister. What does he need to take from this, Mr. Dowden?
Well, I think what the
Indeed, have you spoken with him yet? Have you spoken with the Prime Minister yet?
Yes, of course, I've spoken to.
What's his reaction? What did he say?
I've spoken to the Prime Minister several times last night and this morning, as you might imagine.
And how would you characterise his response?
I think first of all, what I would say in terms of the response is essentially what I said to you. His take is my take on it, and I think the point that you made about what we need to do, and what I really take from this, and what I know the Prime Minister takes from this, is we really need to focus on what matters to people. We need to stop allowing ourselves to be distracted by the kind of noise of what's going on in Westminster, and focus on things like delivering on the reducing NHS backlogs, investing in our NHS, taking advantage of the Brexit opportunities that we have, ensuring that we continue to create opportunities for people and for their children and their grandchildren, whether that's investment in this country or whether that is ensuring that unemployment continues to fall. We need that kind of energy and delivery and focus.
We must live in different countries, Mr. Dowden, because you talk about taking the benefits of Brexit. I'm sure you've seen the Bank of England says we're facing recession. Inflation will probably go over 10%. That will be a 40-year high. Growth is down. There's pay drops, and the pound is taking a kicking against the dollar and the euro. Talk to me about what those opportunities are. Then there are people really struggling out there, Mr. Dowden.
Well, Nick, I don't deny for a minute the challenges that people are facing.
What are you doing to help? What are you doing to help them?
We find ourselves in this unparalleled situation that you're familiar with, whereby we both, as we come out of COVID, we have rapidly rising prices as a result of pressure on supply chains, and we have the crisis in Ukraine and the impact of that on oil and gas. And that's driving inflation, not just in the United Kingdom, but across the Western world and across the United States. Now, in response to that unparalleled position, we are taking unprecedented action with over £22 billion worth of support for people. Of course, we're not going to be able to ensure that we remove all the problems with this, just like no government around the world could do so. But we are really focused on addressing that, whether that is increasing the national living wage by £1,000 or whether that is increasing the thresholds for universal credit, which sounds quite boring, but actually means for people on lower incomes they're £1,000 a year better off. That's where the focus of the government is.
Do you support reports that there should possibly be tax cuts, either in VAT or corporation tax? Would you be urging the Chancellor to do one or both?
Well, I've always believed that people that know how best to spend their money are the people themselves and not the government.
So you would agree to cut that?
We should always look at opportunities to reduce tax, but that is exactly what we did in the budget. So we increased the national insurance threshold. From July, that means that people will be seeing their taxes cut. And the Chancellor set out a path to smaller government and lower tax with an income tax next year.
But corporation tax has been increased.
And of course, we need to look at to do more. That's a challenge always for Conservative governments.
But you're aware corporation tax has been increased. National insurance has been increased. Those taxes have been raised, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if you take each one of those in turn, in respect of the increase in the national insurance contribution, that was in order to deal with the enormous NHS backlogs caused by COVID. I think that was the right thing to do. But actually, if you take the increase in the threshold announced by the Chancellor, the net effect of that is that for 70% of people, they're going to be better off as a result of both of those changes. And if you look at what we've done with corporation tax, of course we had to take difficult decisions to increase corporation tax as a result of this, the spending required to deal with COVID. But our corporation tax remains pretty much the lowest of any major country in the world.
Increased.
So we still remain competitive in that field. But I've always wanted to look at opportunities to cut tax. And indeed, if you look at what we managed to do in the coalition government led by David Cameron, we cut corporation tax and we increased thresholds, and we will look to do more.
As chairman of the Conservative Party, how do you respond to this tweet from a local journalist in London in the Tory stronghold of Hampstead Town? Labour may have won the seat and had to get their candidate out of bed in time to be here for a declaration. They'd done no work, so told the candidate he wouldn't be needed. He ended up winning in Hampstead. You're chairman of the Conservative Party. What do you say to that?
Well, look, Nick, you're familiar with the situation.
No,
in
I'm not familiar with running the Conservative Party, but the way it's going, you might want to have someone in who can.
It has. I think that's a little unfair, Nick.
Come on.
I think if you look what's been happening in London,
this bloke was told you can go to bed, chum. We won't need you. He's won.
If you look at what's happened across the piece in London over the past 20 years or so, it has been the case that we have we have lost vote share. If you look at Wandsworth, past 20 years we've been losing vote share. We only clung on by 200 votes. We're not doing brilliantly in London right now. But if you look across the rest of the country, if you take, for example, Thurrock, which I believe that Labour had controlled for the past 30 years.
The bloke had gone to bed and he won.
I think they're down to about 5 seats. I accepted at the top of this interview that we had difficult results in London, but I do think you have to look at the picture across the board.
All right. Lastly, you're going to like this one. Do you regularly buy supermarket-owned brand goods, Mr. Dowden?
Well, I'm afraid I rarely get the opportunity to go to the shops, given my extensive duties as chairman of the Conservative Party. But when I pop down to my local Tesco's, of course, I buy own brand products.
So you'd know the price of a tin of beans?
Well, I would think, yes. I'm not going to get into this this sort of...
But you'd know the price of a tin of baked beans.
You know what? I tell you, I wouldn't know the price of a tin of baked beans. I'll tell you why. I have never liked baked beans. I've never purchased a tin of baked beans in my entire life. Not because of price, but because of my own personal taste.
Oh, right, OK. So a pint of milk?
Just the one pint. I think it's about 50p, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll let you off. It's 55. Always good speaking with you, Oliver Dowden, chairman of the Conservative Party. Thank you for appearing here on LBC. We're at 2 minutes after 8. The news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, 3 London councils have gone from the Conservatives to Labour following the local elections. Wandsworth had been Tory for 44 years, and the party's lost Westminster for the first time since its creation in 1964.